Welcome back to the deep dive. You know we love getting into those topics that really make you think, and today we're tackling a big one. The true location of Mecca and Jerusalem.
Two of the holiest cities for billions of people.
Exactly. And we're diving into some research that challenges a lot of what we think we know about these places.
Sounds intriguing.
Oh, it is. It's from a paper called Drachma and Dinar of the Arabic City by Dr. Khaled Waleed.
I've heard of him.
Now get this. He's using some really unexpected stuff to make his case.
Like what?
We're talking linguistics, ancient coins, even the Quran itself.
Wow. Okay, so right off the bat, this is multidisciplinary.
Very much so. And one of the biggest claims he makes is that the location of Mecca, like the actual physical location, might have shifted throughout history. He's specifically talking about a move from Petra to Jerusalem.
Okay, now that's a bold claim.
It definitely is. I mean, that's not something you hear every day.
Not at all. So how does he back that up?
Well, he starts by looking at the Quran. And he points to certain verses that he thinks hint at this geographical shift.
Oh, I see. So he's going right to the source.
Yeah, and he brings up some really interesting points. For example, he talks about the change in the prophet's name from Ibrahim to Abraham and from Abed to Muhammad.
Right, those are well-known variations. But he's suggesting these changes weren't just, I don't know, linguistic.
Exactly. He's saying they actually reflect this physical transition of the holy city. From Petra to Jerusalem, he even ties it into those verses in the Quran about purifying the holy city.
Interesting. So it's not just a spiritual purification he's talking about.
Right. He's implying that this purification also involved a physical relocation.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, there's always more.
He takes this Quranic story, you know, the one about a hidden treasure beneath a wall?
Yeah.
And he links it to the ongoing excavations under Jerusalem.
Whoa, hold on. Does he say those excavations are actually looking for this treasure?
That's exactly what he's suggesting. And he points to those verses that talk about this treasure being significant for those with pure hearts.
Okay, so we're not just talking about gold and jewels here.
Definitely not. This is a treasure with deep spiritual meaning.
I see. And this ties into a long-standing debate about the location of the first temple in Jerusalem.
Oh, right. That's been a mystery for centuries.
Exactly. So if this treasure were actually found, it could completely rewrite our understanding of biblical history.
Wow. Okay. So we've got a potential shift in Mecca's location, a hidden treasure in Jerusalem. And then Dr. Waleed throws in this curveball that really blew my mind. He looks at the word Medina in Arabic.
Okay.
And he translates it into Latin as herb, which then leads to Europe or Arab.
Wait, are you saying the word Europe could be rooted in the heart of the Islamic world?
That's what he's proposing. It's pretty wild.
That's a pretty big connection to make.
And when you think about how much the Quran emphasizes Arabic as the language of the holy book, well, it makes you wonder about the relationship between Medina and Europe.
It does make you wonder, like maybe there's a deeper historical and cultural link there than we ever realized.
Right. I love these deep dives because it's like we're uncovering these hidden connections that change how we view the world. And Dr. Waleed keeps going. He brings in this whole other field of study called numismatics.
Numismatics.
The study of ancient coins.
Oh, right. Those little windows into the past.
Exactly. And he uses these coins to back up his claims. I'll admit, I wasn't that familiar with numismatics before this, so can you give us a quick rundown? Like, why are these old coins so important?
Sure. They're like little time capsules. They can tell us about trade routes, economic systems, even the cultural influences of different regions.
Oh, I see. So by looking at the types of coins found in different places, we can learn a lot about those places.
Exactly. And that's what Dr. Waleed does. For example, he finds these coins called drachmas in Petra. Yeah, they were silver coins commonly used in ancient Greece and Persia.
Ah, okay. So finding those in Petra suggests some kind of connection there.
Right. It suggests a link between Petra and those empires, especially Persia. And that supports Dr. Waleed's idea that Petra was a really important center in the past, maybe even the location of Mecca before it shifted to Jerusalem.
Okay, so the coins in Petra point to this connection with Persia. But what about Jerusalem?
Well, in Jerusalem, he finds dinars.
Dinars.
Yeah, they're gold coins historically associated with Islamic empires.
Ah, I see. So the presence of dinars in Jerusalem kind of reinforces his timeline.
Exactly. It indicates that Jerusalem was a major center during the Islamic period, which aligns with his theory about the shift in Mecca's location.
So it's not just about finding coins, it's about the types of coins and where they're found.
Right. It's like he's using these coins as clues to trace the movement of religious centers throughout history.
This is all pretty mind-blowing. But I have to ask, how do we know these coins are actually from the time periods Dr. Waleed is talking about? Couldn't they be from a later era?
That's a great question. And it's something archaeologists and historians always think about. Dating ancient artifacts is complex, but there are scientific methods to figure out their age. Carbon dating, analysis of materials, comparisons to other dated artifacts.
Okay, so there are ways to make sure the coins fit the timeline.
Exactly. Dr. Waleed likely uses these methods to make sure the coins he's using as evidence align with his historical narrative.
That makes sense. But even if the coins are from the right time period, couldn't there be other explanations for why they're in those places?
Of course, we always have to consider alternative interpretations. It's possible those coins got there through trade routes or the movement of people, not necessarily because of a shift in a holy city.
Right.
But Dr. Waleed's argument is that the coins, when combined with his analysis of the Quran, historical accounts, and other evidence, all point to his theory.
So it's about looking at the big picture, not just isolated pieces of evidence.
Exactly. It's about how it all fits together, like putting together a puzzle.
I'm starting to get it. But remember those images on the coins from Petra? The ones showing the Kaaba and symbols of celestial worship.
Oh yeah, those are fascinating.
Can you tell us more about them? Like, what makes them so important?
Sure. Dr. Waleed argues that those images give us a glimpse into the religious practices of that time. Seeing symbols associated with the Kaaba in Petra suggests that people might have venerated this structure even before the proposed move to Jerusalem.
So Petra could have been a religious center before Mecca.
That's what Dr. Waleed is suggesting. And those depictions of celestial bodies like the sun and moon reinforce his claim that Petra was a hub for polytheistic worship.
It's like those tiny images on those old coins are showing us a whole different religious landscape. Amazing how much information can be packed into something so small.
Absolutely. And Dr. Waleed doesn't stop there. He connects these images to verses in the Quran that condemn the worship of the sun and moon.
So he's using the Quran to interpret these ancient images. It's like he's saying there was a shift from a time when celestial worship was okay to a time when it was rejected in favor of monotheism.
Exactly. He's weaving together these different threads of evidence to create a more complete understanding of religious history.
This is all so fascinating, but I have to be honest, it's also a lot to take in. It's not every day you have to rethink your whole understanding of these sacred places.
I totally get it. It's a lot to process, and it's normal to have questions and even doubts. But that's also what makes this research so important. It pushes us to think critically, to question what we think we know, and to be open to new perspectives.
Well said. And speaking of new perspectives, I know Dr. Waleed's research goes beyond just the location of Mecca. He also looks at the origins of Islam itself.
Yeah, that's a whole other layer of complexity, and it's one of the most controversial aspects of his work.
It definitely is. But before we get into that, let's take a moment to digest everything we've discussed so far. We've covered a lot of ground today. From ancient languages and coins to these mind-boggling theories about the origins of Islam, Dr. Waleed's research has given us a lot to think about.
It has. And remember, this is just one interpretation. There are many other scholarly perspectives out there.
Exactly. And we always encourage you, our listeners, to do your own research and exploration. Look at different viewpoints, dig a little deeper, and come to your own conclusions.
Critical thinking and an open mind are so important, especially when exploring topics like this.
Couldn't agree more. This has been an incredible deep dive, and I'm walking away with a whole new understanding of Mecca, Jerusalem, and even the origins of Islam.
Me too. It's amazing what we can learn when we're willing to question our assumptions and explore new ideas.
We're still exploring this research by Dr. Khaled Waleed. You know, the one that suggests Mecca may have been in Petra before moving to Jerusalem?
Right, a very thought-provoking theory.
Before the break, we were looking at how he uses those ancient coins as evidence, and even points to the lack of coins in the Arabian desert to back up his claims.
Right, the absence of evidence can be a kind of evidence itself.
Exactly. But let's get back to the Quran for a sec.
Sure.
Earlier, we talked about those changes in the Prophet's name, but Dr. Waleed also highlights verses that mention purifying Mecca.
Right, those verses that describe getting rid of idols and establishing monotheistic worship.
Right. But can you explain a bit more how he connects that purification to this idea of Mecca moving from Petra to Jerusalem?
Well, he basically argues that this purification wasn't just about a spiritual cleansing, but also a physical one. He's saying the move from Petra to Jerusalem was part of that process.
So leaving behind that polytheistic past, symbolized by Petra, and embracing monotheism in Jerusalem was part of purifying the holy city.
Exactly. It's a symbolic break.
Yeah.
From a polytheistic past in Petra to a monotheistic present in Jerusalem.
It really makes you think about how religious practices can change so much over time.
It does.
But I have to admit, this is all pretty new to me. Are there, like, specific examples of what Dr. Waleed considers this purification?
Yeah, good question. One example he gives is the removal of idols from the Kaaba.
Oh, right, the Kaaba, that cube-shaped building in Mecca.
Exactly. That act, getting rid of those idols, is described in the Quran. It's a rejection of polytheism, the belief in many gods, and an affirmation of belief in one God.
Monotheism.
Right. And Dr. Waleed links that directly to the move from Petra, which he argues was a center of polytheism, to Jerusalem, the new center of monotheism.
Okay, so he's using the Quran, those ancient coins, and this whole concept of purification to create this new picture of religious history.
It's quite a fascinating approach.
Now, I know we touched on those ancient coins before, but can we dig a little deeper into the whole numismatics thing?
Sure.
You mentioned Dr. Waleed found those drachmas in Petra.
Yeah.
What exactly are those again, and why is it a big deal that they were found in Petra?
A drachma was a silver coin, one of the most common types of money in the ancient world.
Ah, okay.
And they were used by all sorts of empires, including the Greeks and Persians.
Right.
So finding them in Petra suggests there was a strong connection between Petra and those empires, especially Persia.
Ah, I see.
And that supports Dr. Waleed's claim that Petra was a really important center way back then. Maybe even, as he suggests, the location of Mecca before it moved to Jerusalem.
Okay, so the coins in Petra point to a connection with Persia, but then he finds different coins in Jerusalem.
Exactly. He finds dinars in Jerusalem.
Dinars. Remind me what those are again.
Dinars were gold coins.
Yeah.
And they were mostly used by Islamic empires. So finding them in Jerusalem supports Dr. Waleed's theory about the timeline. It shows that Jerusalem was a major center during the time of those Islamic empires.
Which fits with his idea that Mecca moved there.
Exactly.
So it's not just about finding coins, it's about what types of coins are found and where.
Right. It's like he's using the coins to track the movement of those religious centers throughout history. We're wrapping up our exploration of Dr. Khaled Waleed's research, which, as we've seen, really challenges those conventional ideas about Mecca and Jerusalem. Before the break, we hinted at maybe the most controversial part of his work, his exploration of, well, the origins of Islam.
Yeah, definitely a sensitive topic.
It is, and to be honest, it's where I get a little hesitant, Talking about the origins of any religion, it can be tricky.
You're right. It's super important to approach this with respect and an open mind. And Dr. Waleed's work here, well, it suggests that Islam might have come out of a Judeo-Christian environment.
Okay, so he's saying it's rooted in those earlier traditions. Exactly. He proposes that Islam didn't just appear out of nowhere. It developed in a context where those monotheistic beliefs, the belief in one God, were already there.
I see.
He points to those common threads, things like the belief in one God, the role of prophets, the importance of ethical conduct, all evidence of this connection.
But how does that fit with the traditional understanding of Islam as a unique revelation?
Well, Dr. Waleed argues that the Quran itself acknowledges a continuity with those earlier faiths. He points to the fact that figures like Abraham, Moses, and Jesus are recognized as prophets in the Quran.
Right, they are.
So it's not a complete break from the past,
Yeah.
but maybe more like a continuation or building upon those early revelations.
So he sees it as part of this larger story of monotheism, drawing from and expanding on those traditions that came before.
That's how he sees it.
I can see how that might be a pretty revolutionary idea for some people. It definitely challenges that traditional narrative of Islam's origins.
It does. And that's why it's so important to approach this topic carefully, And remember, we're just presenting Dr. Waleed's research. It's one perspective among many.
Right. It's important to have those different viewpoints out there so people can learn about them and make their own decisions.
Absolutely. Our goal here is to encourage exploration and critical thinking, not to tell anyone what to believe.
Exactly. Now, you mentioned earlier that Dr. Waleed also looks at the historical and political context of this time period.
I did. He highlights the influence of those powerful empires, like the Romans and Persians.
Oh, right. Those were major players back then.
Huge.
Tracing the use of drachmas and dinars mentioned in the Quran,
Right.
we can actually pinpoint the real Mecca,
Interesting.
the holy city described in Islamic texts.
Okay.
And his research challenges the traditional understanding of
Yes.
Mecca being located in present-day Saudi Arabia.
So he's saying that Mecca is not...
He's saying that the traditional location of Mecca is not the right one.
Interesting.
So instead of focusing on modern maps,
Okay.
Dr. Waleed is looking back at the world as it was
I see.
during the time these scriptures were written.
Okay.
So I think it's a really fascinating approach.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it.
What kind of connections does he make
Yeah.
between these ancient currencies and specific locations?
Well, he starts by linking drachmas to the Persian empires
Right.
and their influence over Petra, a city in present-day Jordan.
Okay.
Dr. Waleed suggests that Petra was a significant center of pagan worship during that era.
Okay. So we've got drachmas pointing towards Petra.
Uh-huh.
What about the dinars?
Yeah, where do those fit in?
Where do they fit into this geographical puzzle?
Dinars, on the other hand,
Okay.
are associated with Alexander the Great
Okay.
and later the Byzantine Empire.
That's right.
Both of these powers had strong ties to Jerusalem.
Okay.
And it's Jerusalem that Dr. Waleed ultimately identifies as the true Mecca.
So essentially, Dr. Waleed is suggesting that the Quran itself contains geographical clues embedded in its references to these currencies.
Interesting.
He's making the case that
Okay.
these weren't just randomly chosen terms,
Right.
but deliberate markers pointing to the true location of the holy city.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's like a hidden code.
It is.
That's
It's like he's saying that they were using this language very specifically to point to this place.
Okay.
And he goes even further,
Does he?
arguing that specific Quranic verses actually condemn
Oh, wow.
the pagan practices associated with Petra.
Okay.
For Dr. Waleed, this reinforces his claim that Petra was not the intended holy site.
That's a really interesting interpretation.
It is.
Yeah.
It's like he's reading between the lines.
Right.
Doing some serious detective work with these ancient texts.
He's piecing together clues that most people wouldn't even think to look for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But how does he connect all of this back to Mecca? Or rather, to the idea that Mecca isn't the true Mecca?
Well, Dr. Waleed emphasizes that.
Okay.
While Jerusalem has yielded a wealth of archaeological discoveries, including ancient coins,
Right.
there's a striking lack of similar findings in present-day Mecca.
Huh.
So for him, this absence of evidence further supports his theory that the location of the holy city has been misidentified throughout history.
So it's like he's piecing together this puzzle
Yeah.
using these currency clues and archaeological observations
Yeah, like a historical puzzle.
to paint a whole new picture
Right.
of where Mecca might have been.
And it really challenges how we think about this.
It does. This history.
It makes you kind of rethink everything you thought you knew.
Absolutely.
It's a very different picture than what's traditionally been accepted.
Right. And it's important to remember
that Dr. Waleed's interpretations are just one perspective.
Of course.
Among many.
We have to acknowledge that.
Yeah, there are other viewpoints out there.
Right. And so
we need to consider those as well.
we need to hear all sides of the story.
Absolutely.
So let's dig a bit deeper into some of Dr. Waleed's specific arguments.
Okay, sounds good.
He mentioned something called calibration.
Right.
What exactly is he referring to there,
Yeah.
and how does that fit into his overall theory?
So this is where Dr. Waleed's research takes a really fascinating turn.
Okay.
He draws a connection between the modern word calibration and the Arabic word for kilogram.
All right.
And he links them both back to the patriarch,
Abraham.
Abraham.
Yeah. Wow.
It's an interesting connection.
It's unexpected. How does he make that connection?
Well, he suggests that ancient standards of measurement, the very foundation of calibration, originated in Jerusalem, a city deeply associated with Abraham. I see. He's arguing that this connection further emphasizes Jerusalem's historical and religious importance.
So it sounds like he's weaving together linguistics, history, religious texts.
To build his case.
It's
a very multifaceted approach.
It is. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Is there anything else he uses to bolster his claim about Jerusalem being the true Mecca?
He also points to the Arabic word for city, a Medina, and its potential translation to herb in Latin.
Urbe.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that term. It's a Latin word meaning city, often used to refer to Rome,
Exactly.
the heart of the Roman Empire.
Right.
But how does that connect to Jerusalem?
That's precisely what makes Dr. Waleed's argument so intriguing.
Okay.
By highlighting this potential linguistic link between Al-Medina and Erb,
Right.
he suggests a divinely ordained connection between Jerusalem and the Western world, specifically the Roman and later Byzantine empires.
So he's suggesting this deeper, perhaps even spiritual link between Jerusalem and the West.
Right.
A connection that transcends mere geography.
Exactly.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
I know, it's a lot to take in.
Why this would point to Jerusalem being the Becca rather than Mecca.
Well, remember, we're looking at this through the lens of Dr. Waleed's interpretation.
Right.
He believes that these linguistic connections, coupled with the currency evidence and the absence of archaeological findings in Mecca, all point to a different historical narrative. Than the one we're accustomed to.
So this is definitely a lot to unpack.
Yeah, we've just scratched the surface here.
It certainly raises some eyebrows.
It does.
And there's still much more to explore in Dr. Waleed's research.
Absolutely.
One of the most intriguing aspects that we haven't touched on yet.
Oh yeah, what's that?
Is this Star of Becca rock.
Unfortunately, Dr. Waleed doesn't give us a lot to go on about this Star of Becca rock. But since we know he thinks Becca is in Jerusalem, maybe we can speculate a bit.
Okay, so let's put on our historian hats. What could fit that description in Jerusalem?
Well, Jerusalem has such a long history with so many different civilizations. Maybe this Star of Becca rock is talking about those star-shaped patterns.
Oh, yeah.
You see in Herodian architecture.
Right, King Herod.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was around the time of Jesus.
Exactly. And he was known for using those patterns in his buildings.
I see. So maybe it's not a literal rock shaped like a star, but more of a star motif that was used in important buildings in Jerusalem back then?
Exactly. That's a good possibility.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or it could be something even more interesting.
Oh, like what?
Like maybe some kind of astronomical marker.
Oh, wow.
We know that a lot of ancient cultures, especially in the Middle East, were really into astronomy.
Yeah.
So maybe this rock was used to track the stars.
Wow.
And that would give Jerusalem this cosmic significance.
That's fascinating.
Right?
It's like we're trying to decode some message from the past.
Yeah.
Using Dr. Waleed's research as our guide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how much we still don't know about ancient history.
There's so much mystery out there still.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so captivating.
Yeah, it really makes you think.
It does.
Question everything you thought you knew.
It makes you question what you know.
Right.
And be open to new interpretations of the past.
Yeah, totally.
You know, speaking of questioning what we know.
Yes.
Dr. Waleed's point about the lack of ancient coins in Mecca really stuck with me. He says that Jerusalem has all these coins, but Mecca doesn't, and that this supports his theory.
Right.
But couldn't there be other explanations?
Of course.
For why we haven't found coins in Mecca?
Yeah.
What if they're just waiting to be discovered?
That's a good point. Archaeology is always uncovering new things.
Yeah.
It's totally possible that future excavations in Mecca might find ancient coins.
Okay.
But also, think critically. Don't just believe everything you hear.
Right.
Dig deeper.
Yeah.
Look at different sources. And most importantly, make up your own mind.
Don't just be passive.
Right.
Be active.
Don't just consume information.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Be a part of uncovering history.
Yeah, be a part of the discovery process.
Exactly. Yeah. That's amazing.
And who knows? Maybe our listener will make the next big discovery.
Wow.
The one that changes everything.
That would be amazing.
It would.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive
into
the secrets of Mecca and Jerusalem.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did.
It was a great discussion.
We hope this sparked your curiosity.
Yeah, keep those minds engaged.
It gave you something to think about.
Absolutely.
Until next time.
Yeah.
Keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
And keep those minds engaged.
See you next time.